The title of our lesson is The Giving of Manna. Last Sunday we studied about the leaving of Egypt. The crossing of the Red Sea is what we were studying about last Sunday. And you know, as we were studying that, we realized that the children of Israel was kind of in a hard rock in a hard place. You know, they had the sea on one side, they had the Egyptians coming after them, and man, we were talking about how they were really in a predicament. Well, that's the way we were before we got saved. We were in a real bad predicament. I mean, we had trouble on one side, we had trouble behind. God prepared a way by the wind blowing across that Red Sea. Well, God prepared a way for us as sinners when He sent Jesus. And to die, to live on the earth, to die, and to be resurrected. Okay, the way was prepared in the sea. They could either go that way, or they could turn and try and fight the Egyptians. But God's way was to lead them right through the sea. Okay, same way with us. When God has prepared the way for us, we can either take His way, or we can turn around and try and fight the devil on our own power. And that don't work. No. That will never work. So the best way to do is go God's way. Okay, then the trip through the Red Sea was the new birth. Was the actual forgiveness of our sins is what it was. Then the destruction of Pharaoh and his army was, you know, how we talked about how the wheels fell off the cart, you know, and then the water came together. That was the destruction of Pharaoh and his army. That's the destruction that sin has a hold on us when we're in sin. Sin has a hold on us. Well, when we go through the Red Sea, or when we get saved, sin has no more a hold on us. God destroyed it all. God destroyed it all. Aren't we proud? Aren't we happy for that? And then as they got over on the other side, the destruction of Pharaoh, they had no more problems with Pharaoh and all that anymore. What did they do? They had a song of praise. They had a song of praise, thanking the Lord that they had led them through this. Delivered them from the mess that they were in. Delivered them from the rock and the hard place. Remember that I was talking about? Delivered them from that. And, you know, that's a type of us when we are delivered from sin, the joy of salvation. The joy of salvation. Now, I kind of wanted to reiterate that with you from last Sunday, but you know, it's all types and antitypes of salvation that we have now. Like I said, last Sunday we studied about leaving Egypt, and now today we're going to study about how they go further towards the land of Canaan, the promised land that they were going, and then they have some problems. So let's see what happens here. Our memory verse is John 6:51. It's there in your quarterly there, and it says, "I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread that I will give is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world." Okay, let's kind of keep that in the back of our mind. That's a New Testament scripture there. That's written in John. That's Jesus talking, is what it was. But now we're going to study the manna that was given. You have an adult emphasis there, but I'm going to read a junior emphasis. It's not in your quarterly there, but I want to read the junior emphasis. And it says, a month after Israel left Egypt, they started to murmur. They started to murmur. Well, they really started before that, but you know, they're starting to murmur. They wished for Egypt again. Never, when you're delivered from sin, never wish you were back in sin. This is kind of what they were doing here. You know, God told them, says, if you will trust me, I will take care of you. And they did. You know, God took care of them through all the plagues, and especially the 10th plague, which was the putting the blood on the doorpost, you know, the Passover part. God took care of them there. And you know, I didn't bring it out at the time, but you know, when the first plague was turning the water into blood, you know, the water became blood. That blood was altogether different than the blood that they painted over the doorpost. If they would have saved some of that blood and used that to paint over the doorpost, that wouldn't work, because it wasn't the blood that was required. Even though they had the blood. Or if they would have took red paint and painted on the doorpost, that wouldn't have worked. God would have, you can't pull the wool over to God's eyes. There's no way that you can pull the wool over God's eyes. God knows. But they murmured. They wished for Egypt again. And as I was saying, never wish to go back, because all you're going to do is have trouble. All you're going to do is have trouble. If we will only trust in Jesus, put our full trust in Him, God will take care of us. God heard their sinful complaining. He in His goodness had a plan. Let's go to our first reading there, Exodus 16:11. And it says, And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, I have heard the murmuring of the children of Israel. Speak unto them, saying, At even ye shall eat flesh, and in the morning ye shall be filled with bread, and ye shall know that I am the Lord your God. Now, their complaining was that they didn't have bread. That was their complaining. You know, people will always find something to gripe about. No matter how good we have it, or how bad we think we've got it, we tend to kind of complain. But you know, it says in the Bible, count your blessings. There's a song, count your many blessings. Name them one by one. You know, sometimes I have to do that. Sometimes I just sit down and I think, you know, well, things is not going real good right now, but you know, I'm still here. I'm not in the and in my daily devotion, I'm reading in Job right now, and I think, you know, I don't have it near as bad as Job had it. Job had it terrible, you know. But, you know, and he was a just and upright man, but yet God was allowing him to go through the things that he went through so that he could know where he really stood with God. And you know, sometimes we have to go through some things like this. You know, every time that I work at a school system, I'm a cook up at a school system, and the other day, during the teacher's walkout, the milkman didn't get there quite as early as everybody thought that he should have, because he had a whole bunch of schools to make all in one day and all. And so we were down to white milk. Well, you know what happens when you just only have white milk and the kids are used to drinking strawberry or chocolate or something else, you know. Well, there was a lot of complaining, you know. I told the kids, I said, let me tell you something. Tomorrow, when you get your chocolate milk, it'll make you appreciate it a whole lot more. And you know, that's the way it is with us a lot of times. You know, we might gripe and complain and go on, but you know, because we don't have something, you know, but then when we get it, it makes us appreciate it. And when we do get it, you know, it makes us appreciate it. And you know, that's the same way with these children of Israel. The children of Israel there, complaining because there wasn't bread, complaining that there wasn't meat other than cattle, I guess, beef or whatever, you know. But you know, people are always going to find something to complain about. That's the reason why God said, or Paul wrote in his epistle, whatever state you're in, be content. Whatever state you're in, be content. It could be worse. You know, and I think, well, I went through surgeries, I went through this, I went through that, you know, but I've never had boils like Job had, you know. So I can be thankful for that. God's been good to me. God has been good to me. Let's go ahead and read here. I'm gonna reread these and then read clear down to 15. I'm gonna start with 11 and read clear down to 15 then of Exodus there. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, I have heard the murmuring of the children of Israel, speaking to them, saying, At even ye shall eat flesh, and in the morning ye shall be filled with bread. And ye shall know that I am the Lord your God. And that's something we have to really keep in mind, to know that the Lord your God is in control. That's what we need to know. We need to always keep that in the forefront of our life. Verse 13, and it came to pass that at even the quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew laid round about the host. And when the dew that lay was gone up before, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there laid a small round thing, as small as the say that again, hoarfrost on the ground. That word means white. That word that I can't pronounce means white. It's like frost. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, It is manna, for they was not what it was. In other words, they didn't know what it was. And Moses said unto them, This is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat. This is what you asked for. Bread. Well, this is what God's given you for it. Sister Bayless, what does manna mean?
What is it?
Okay, I knew she knew that because I'd heard her say that before. That's what manna means. What is it? You know, when they went out that morning, what is it? You know, it's not snow. It kind of looks like snow, but what is it? You know, but it was what God was providing them for. That's what God decided to provide them with, was this manna. Is manna something that we see regularly? As far as I know, I've never seen it. I've never seen manna before. I've never seen anything like this stuff before. But it was what God provided them. I've never been swallowed by a fish either. But that happened, you know. I never seen Jesus as a child, as a baby, as a grown man either. But that don't mean it didn't happen. It happened. God promised food. God told Moses he would send flesh in the evening and bread in the morning. It happened as he said. In the evening, quail came up. Quail. Have you ever ate a quail? I have. I know what a quail is. I used to go quail hunting and used to eat quail. Quail's good. Quail's good meat. There's not a thing wrong with it. But manna, I've never. I think you could go out in the woods and do like mushroom hunting, but I don't think you'd ever find manna. I think that's a thing of the past. But you know, if God decides to want to use that sometime, He's not limited that He can't. He could. So there were so many they were so many of these quails that they covered the camp. The people could catch them and eat them. In the morning, they saw the dew on the ground, or the manna that was on the ground. That's what they say. When the dew dried off in the morning, there on the ground were many, many little round white grains. That's what the commentator is saying. What was it? They wondered. And so therefore, they said a word, manna. Meaning, what is it? As Sister Bayless has told us, what is it? And that they thought, well, that'll be a good name for it. I guess that's what they thought. That'd be a good name for it because we don't know what it is. We can't explain it. It's something that is given to God, given from God, or given by God. But you know, it didn't just fall into a bucket for them, you know, or a basket. They had to go out and work for it. They had to go out and gather it up. Same way with the quail. The quail wasn't dressed and ready and cooked and everything, or raw even, so that they can cook it, but they had to catch them. They had to catch them. God allows us to take care of ourselves, but He has to be the source of the situation. The source of the situation so that so that He can provide for us as He wants us to, no matter what it is, whether it's for our material need or whether it's for our spiritual need. God provides for us. They called it manna. Moses told them it was bread from the Lord. Let's go to verse 16 then. This is the thing which the Lord hath commanded. Gather of it every man according to his eating, an omer for every man according to the number of your persons. Take ye every man for them which are in his tent. Okay, omer, that was a word that's not real familiar. We don't use that word very often, but that is a measurement of bread is what it is. I've heard some people say that it was about like a half a gallon, and I've heard other people say it's about a gallon. But whatever it was, they knew what it was back then. You know, all of us knows what a gallon is, and you know, approximately what a gallon is, and then half of that would be a half a gallon. We know that. So they knew what this was. You know, maybe a measurement that people are not real familiar with nowadays. They used to be, probably 100 years ago, was a peck. You know, a peck is a quarter of a bushel, and you know, that's a lot of people don't know that now, because that's a measurement that we don't use that much anymore. A bushel, farmers use that all the time. Bushel of grain, and that's how it's all sold. But this here, omer, was used regularly. They knew exactly what it was. Let's go to verse 17. And the children of Israel did so, and gathered some more and some less. And when they did meet it with a omer, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack. They gathered every man according to his eating. Moses told them, says, gather it up. Gather it up. Gather it up. Let's go to verse 19. And Moses said, let no man leave of it till the morning. In other words, when you get done eating of an evening, you're going to have to throw it out. You're going to have to get rid of it. Well, notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto Moses, but some of them left it until the morning. And what happened? Well, let's read a little more. And it bred worms and stank. In other words, it stinks. It rots real quick. And Moses was wroth with them because they didn't do what God had told them to do. You know? We have to follow the leading of God whithersoever and whatsoever He saith. You know? Gather this much. Gather what you'll eat. Don't keep it until tomorrow, because it's not going to work. And He may not say because it's not going to work. He says gather it, get rid of it at the evening time. That may be all God tells us, you know, and we have to trust Him. Well, yeah, but He may not send it tomorrow. Well, we have to trust Him, you know. And so, you know, that's everyday living. This is a type of salvation, and God feeding us on the spiritual things that He has for us. We have to trust each and every day. You know, well, what if I don't read my Bible today? Well, you're missing a blessing, I'll guarantee you. What if I go a week without reading the Bible? You know, well, you're missing a big blessing, you know. You're going to run into problems when that happens. When you put off, what does it say? 7 days without reading a Bible makes 1 week. Week, W-E-A-K, week. You know, that's what I'm talking about. But you know, that's true. You know, it's a catchy little phrase, but it's true. We have to follow God whithersoever He leads us. We don't want to jump ahead of God. And we don't want to drag our feet. You've heard me say that many a time. We don't want to jump ahead of God, and we don't want to drag our feet. You know, we got to do what God tells us to do. Moses was wroth with them. Verse 21, and they gathered it every morning, every man according to his eating. And when the sun waxed hot, it melted. This substance, manna is what I'm talking about, was not to be hoarded. The people were not to keep manna over for the next day. If some was not eaten, it was to be destroyed. Why not save it? Why not save it? Because God would send more the next day. That was what was happening. God said, I will supply each day what you need. I will supply it. It would be fresh. God wants us to have a fresh meal, a fresh spiritual meal each and every day. You know, we can't, well, I'm going to read a whole bunch of verses today, and then that'll take care of me for a week. That don't work. She's over here shaking her head. Nope, that don't work. I agree with her. It does not work. It does not work. We have to be led of God as God leads us. Because God would send more the next day. It would be fresh. Some thought they knew better. They disobeyed. They saved some in the morning. And what happened? It got worms and it started stinking. It really did. They learned to gather it every morning. They must gather it early or the sun would melt it. You couldn't be a sleepyhead. If you slept late, you go hungry that day. You go hungry if you. God has organization in what He does, and He is the head of that organization. He organizes things according to His will. You know, some of us might think that, we'll kind of help organize the church and we'll help do this. It don't work. It don't work. God is the one that organizes the church. God is the one that built the church, and we are to follow after the head is what we're to do. And He said to gather it early in the morning, because when the sun comes out, it's gonna melt away. Let's look at Exodus 16, verse 22 through 24. And it came to pass on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for one man, and all the rulers of the congregations came and told Moses. Okay? This was what God had intended for them to do. On the 6th day, then they were to gather a double amount. A double amount. But why? Well, sometimes God don't tell us. But we know the rest of the story. But it was because the next day was going to be the Sabbath day. And when God created the earth, how many days did it take Him to create the earth? It took Him 6 days. You got the point there. I know where you come. It took Him 6 days. But then on the 7th day, He rested. Yep. Yeah, it took Him 6 days. But if God rests, then we ought to rest also. If God tells us to set aside one day for me, then that's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. And so, God even did that. So this is where we're going to here. This is what's happening here. I intend for you to rest the 7th day. I intend for you to rest that 7th day. But it goes bad. But the stuff goes bad. Manna goes bad. If it's kept overnight. Well, let's look at verse 23. And He said unto them, This is that which the Lord has said. Tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that which ye will bake today. And help me out with that word. How you pronounce that? Seethe. Seethe. That ye may seethe, and that which remaineth overlay up for you to be kept until the morning. Don't you think that going through people's mind, but it's going to get bad, it's going to stink? Because I had some the other day that went that way, Well, kind of telling on yourself, ain't you? You gathered too much, didn't you? And you tried to keep it. But, there's probably somebody that did say that, I've been several people say that, but it's going to go bad. And they laid it up till the morning as Moses bade, and it did not stink, neither was there any worm therein. What a miracle. What a miracle. The weather didn't change. The bugs didn't change that lived in that stuff. It didn't change, but God preserved it. It was fresh. It was fixed so that they would not have to work on the Sabbath day. Yes.
Seed means to cook by boiling it in a liquid.
Okay. Yes. It's kind of like marinating. Is kind of what it's like. It's boiling in a liquid, because I know this word is also used in the I think it's in the law about how to fix some kind of offering that it was not to soothe the meat in the milk of its mother, is what it was. And so it's kind of, it's boiled in that, yes. And so that's what it was. But God said they could do that here, see, with the manna. You know, God is smart. You know what? God knows what He's doing. He prepares us, fixes us so that we can follow Him, and then lays out the way for us. It's so easy. You know, we take it a lot of times and we'll think, oh my, this is hard, you know. I'm not sure I know exactly what God wants me to do, and why does He want me to be the one to do such and such, or one thing and another. But you know, when God lays on our heart to do something, we better get up and go. You know, don't drag. We can't drag our feet. Like I said, we can't get ahead of God, and we don't want to drag our feet. You know, it's bad both ways. We need to be right in the center of God's will. No gathering on the Sabbath. On the 6th day of the week, the people got a surprise. They gathered manna as usual. However, when it was measured, there were two homers for each person. And the rulers told Moses, yes, he said, the Lord said it would be so. Tomorrow is the Sabbath, when we must not work. No manna will come then. God didn't even send it on the Sabbath day. So if you didn't gather up enough of it, then you had to wait till the following day. The Sabbath would be on Saturday, so you'd have to wait on Sunday. Well, we kind of think as the Sabbath day as Sunday, you know, but we'd have to gather Saturday night, and then we'd have to go until Monday morning, kinda. Now that's not quite right, but that's what I'm saying. Well, I smell dinner cooking back there, and it smells pretty good, you know, and I'm looking forward to that, you know. But I'd sure hate to have to do without dinner. But you know, if they didn't gather it, then they was going to have to do without. Sure. You know, so. And then there could be many excuses of why you didn't gather like you're supposed to. You know, people will come up with all kinds of excuses. One thing that came to my mind was, well, I'm fasting to this today. Really? You're going to use that as an excuse, you know? Just because you didn't want to gather enough of it, or you didn't trust in God, now you're going to say you're fasting? People will do things like that, you know. We have to be in the center of God's will. It's not, you know, we might laugh and kind of think things like that, but you know, God's business is serious. God's business is serious. He knows whether you're fasting. Maybe somebody did feel led to fast that day and was serious. Then that God would appreciate that. God appreciates that. But don't use it as just an excuse of being something else, lazy or whatever, or not following God's will. God knows. You can't pull no wool over God's eyes. He knows. Cook it today and keep some for tomorrow, is what was the order that they were to do. And that was on the Sabbath day, the day before the Sabbath day only. If you had manna left over on the Sabbath day, what do you suppose happened to it? They got rid of it. They're supposed to get rid of it. But if they keep it, worms would got into it, wouldn't it? 2-day-old bread, worms would get into it. And the next morning, there it was again. Just as God had promised. Okay, 6 days, we got it. The Sabbath day, tomorrow's Sabbath day. We got to gather double amount, you know. And I am probably sure that there was people that thought, well, we've had it for 6 days now again. It'll probably come, you know. It didn't. God never fails. What God says, God means. God never fails. And so I want you to, if you don't get anything out of the lesson but one thing, get this, that God has a plan for each and every one of us. God is going to take care of each and every one of us. We have to go through the Red Sea. God's already made the Red Sea possible. He's already gave us the plan of salvation. He's already taken care of it. Now we're right there. Are we going to go through it as God wants us to? Or are we going to try and turn back and fight? You know, fight the devil on our own strength. We can't do it. The best way is to go through it. All right? The Red Sea comes together and gets rid of the problems of sin, the destructions of sin. God gets rid of that. Now we can go on in His power. That's not to say that we're not going to meet with trials and temptations. Brother Bayless read us a message Wednesday, a part of the Scripture Wednesday about trials and temptations. But God's going to make a way for us to get through them. Amen. He's going to make a way for us to get through. But we've got to trust Him. In the spiritual needs that we have, the manna, or the Word of God as we read it, or as we hear it brought across the pulpit, or as we study, there's many ways that we can get the spiritual food that we need through song. We can even get it through song. We can get it in many different ways. But God is going to provide for us the needs that we have. He's going to supply it. He will. He will. Let's look at John, our memory verse now, John 6:51. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. Thank God for that. This is before Jesus went to the cross. And He's telling the people, I am that living bread. I am that manna. I'm that spiritual manna that was rained down from heaven back years and years and years ago, He could have said. Back during the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. That's what He's talking about there. Now, I'm that spiritual manna, and eventually you're going to see how it all works out here. And He says, I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. You know, I think he was sitting at a well one time, and a woman came up, and he used that kind of the same words there, only it was with the water. And she didn't quite understand it. He says, well, if you drink of the water that I give you, you'll never thirst again. Oh, you mean I will never have to come back to this well? Well, no, that ain't quite what I meant, you know. But it was the spiritual part of it that you would never thirst again. It was the spiritual part. You know, we must have a relationship with God each and every day. Each and every day we must have a relationship with God. We can't go a day without having a relationship with God. Because otherwise we're going to get in trouble. we're gonna be in deep trouble if that happens. And you know, we have to be. God's going to supply us the water. He's going to supply us the bread that we need, and I'm talking about spiritual water, the spiritual bread that we need. God's made the way. It's all up to us. We have the choice now of what we're going to do. You know, God could have forced us to be able to follow after Him, but He didn't want it that way. He wanted us to choose His way. And you know, we have so much. You might say we have so much on the angels. The angels are forced to serve God, you know. But you know, we have the choice. And you know, we know where we have been at one time. And you know, as God leads us and saves us and brings us into the fellowship with Him, we've experienced what was the bad part. And we can look back to that as, I never want to go back that way anymore. I never want to go back there. You know, I always say never turn back and look at sin. Never turn back to sin to lust after it. You might kind of look back and see where God brought you to make you appreciate what you have now. And so that's the only way to look back. He that putteth his hand to the plow and looketh back isn't fitting for the kingdom of heaven. That's to lust back after that, is what he's talking about. But so once in a while we might have to take a peek and think, you know, God delivered me from all this, and I thank God for that. I'm going to keep my eyes on God, and that's very important. Whether it's for financial, or whether it's for a place to live, whether it's our work, whether it's our food, whatever it is, God's going to take care of us. God's going to take care of us. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread, and now he's talking about live forever. He's talking about that spiritual bread is what he's talking about here. Is what he's talking about. God may supply us with a loaf of bread, but you know, we eat that and we thank the Lord for that. And I thank the Lord for that. But you know, that bread, we're going to get hungry again. I ate yesterday, and I was looking for food this morning, you know, because I got hungry again because it's literal food. But you know, the bread that God gives us, the spiritual bread that God gives us, we never hunger. We never will hunger after it, but it'll always supply our need, is what it'll do. And the bread that I will give is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. Jesus said He is the living bread. He said if we eat of Him, we would live forever. He did not mean we would really eat His body. He meant we would take His life into our hearts. If we do, He will make our souls live. Then we will go to heaven to live there forever. The manna, now going back to the manna came from God. Well, guess what? Jesus is that manna. Jesus came from God. The manna gave life to bodies. Jesus gives life to our souls. Jesus is the one that gives life to our soul. Manna was not to be hoarded, but gathered fresh each morning. We cannot hoard strength from Jesus, but we must pray and get strength from Him every day. Like I said, I'll read a whole bunch of scriptures today, and then I won't have to the rest of the week. That's what you're trying to do, is hoard it. And that don't work. That don't work. He, talking about Jesus, is our daily bread. For the Sabbath day, when no manna came, God gave an extra supply. For times when we need extra help from God, He gives extra help. And you know, there's times when I do need extra help. There's times that, Lord, I am here. I'm ready to do whatever you want me to do, and I don't see any way out. And God will make a way out for you. a lot of times it comes to a point where we have to just put our whole trust in God and say, Lord, there's no other way. I'm trusting in you, and I'm leaving it all up to you. Whatever, wherever, and whatever you want me to say, do, or be. That's what I'll do. And you know, we have to do that every day. Every day. There's lots of times when things, you know, there may be some days when things are going good and it's pretty easy to live for God, you know. But then, what about them days that there's a little more trials and temptations, you know? We gotta still put our trust in Him. His grace is always sufficient. The manna, and of course I've brought this out, the manna is a type of Jesus Christ. Murmuring has no place in our heart and life. Murmuring only causes trouble for ourselves, with ourselves, with our spouse, with our children, with other saints, with unsaved people. What good does murmuring do? I pretty much covered everybody, didn't I? What good does murmuring do? Yeah, what about on the job? What if you murmur against your boss, you know? Okay, now let's look at it spiritually. When we murmur, we're murmuring against the head. That's against Jesus. That's against God. See what happened to these people when they murmured? You know, God was wrath with them. Moses was wroth with them. Was aggravated at them. You know, and you know, in order to keep unity within ourselves, with our spouse, with our children, with our saved ones, with the ones we work with sinners, we have to be in tune with God. We have to be in tune with God. God has set up the church in a way that if everybody did according to what He done, it would be just fit together perfectly, you know. And that was His intention. And that is my intention, that I be that little 2x4 or that little whatever, and I'm in my place. And that needs to be each and every one of our desire is to be. You know, whether you're that one up there or you're this one here or even if you're the pulpit, you get looked at every day, you know. You know, not everybody is a pulpit. What if we just had a pulpit? That wouldn't work very good, you know. But, you know, you might be the back door, or you might be something that's not too important, you might think. But guess what? You're important to God. Amen. You're important to God, and I'm not trying to please people, but I want to please God, and that should be the desire of every one of our hearts. The next Sunday lesson will be water from the rock. So we'll see what God has for us then.